Hi, and welcome to Chatty AF, the Anime Feminist podcast. My name is Caitlin, a writer and editor for Anime Feminist, as well as the owner of the blog Heroine Problem. Joining me today are Ashley and Lianne.
Hi, I'm Ashley. I run a Shoujo Manga podcast called Shoujo and Tell.
I'm Lianne Sentar. I'm marketing manager at Seven Seas Entertainment and editor at Sparkler Monthly.
And I'm Peter, the podcast editor. This podcast ran on a bit long, so we cut into two pieces. Last week we put up the first piece, if you haven't caught that one yet, and this one is the second half. They didn't actually break in the middle of it, so you're just going to get dropped right back into the conversation here at what I thought was kind of a natural breaking point, so please enjoy the second half of this podcast.
You know, we've all been into shoujo for quite a while. Lianne, you even you were kind of in on the ground floor of it coming out in the US, and I think Ashley and I both kind of got into it when it was first starting to become considered even possible to US markets,
2002, I would say.
2002. Yep 2002. Because I know that Fushigi Yugi was considered a huge financial risk because it was aimed at girls unambiguously.
Yes. Sort of. So are you talking about it was considered a risk in Japan or was considered a risk here?
In the US.
What's interesting about that was Sailor Moon was such a success, and it was also one of the first manga to come over here, and it kind of made Tokyo pop into the company that it eventually became because of that success. So although I agree that it was a risk, there wasn't that much that had succeeded that was shonen either. So I think I know that at that point
it's Ranma.
Ranma, right? At that point the shoujo that Viz had been experimenting with was some stories by Keiko Nishi, a love song and other stories. I think that was Keiko Nishi.
There was a Moto Hagio.
They had a Moto Hagio.
Moto Hagio.
AA Prime, which I read too young. It messed me up.
I got the Viz catalogs in the mail. I never bought anything out of them because I was 13, but I got them in the mail and spent a lot of time looking at them, thinking about all of the series I wanted to read and watch.
I think they might have started with Banana Fish around then, with Pulp Magazine, and then they were also doing X, Clamps X, also known as X 1999, in I think in America, and these are not beginner shoujo, so
no,
I can see why they Viz might have been apprehensive about that, because it was well, we've tried all of these shoujo.
Yeah, well, and also they're I would say that they are series that are more disguising them as shoujo is a lot easier. Banana Fish is a gritty crime drama. X is super duper gory and violent, which were both qualities that tended to be marketed towards boys in U.S. media.
I literally didn't know that X was a shoujo manga until very recently, making the list of everything that's available in America, basically, for my podcast. I was wait, X is a shoujo manga? I'm so confused.
Yeah. I think it might have run in Asuka, which was not, the most femme magazine, but...
Right. But, I feel it took a long time for shoujo manga to be considered even remotely viable in the US. But
sort of,
I think, but I feel and plus there's not a lot of scholarship about it. There's a lot of just little things that sort of add up to the picture that shoujo manga isn't really considered, people might like it, but it's not taken quite as seriously. I've had people tell me that it's just, once you get outside of the pocket of fandom that's oh yeah, shoujo manga's great, the general assumption in anime fandom is that shonen is better.
Right. Oh, for sure. I think if you're talking about critical acceptance, for sure. Totally agree with you there. The stuff that tends to be considered works of art are seinen. They're targeted to adult men. Big surprise. But at the same time...
You mean the people who have been forming the U.S. anime industry ever since the very beginning? The stuff aimed at them is taken more seriously? Shocking.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting about the manga industry is, upper management and like the owners are all men, but like the editorial level, there's like tons of women in the manga industry. I've worked with more women than I've worked with men. And I think part of the reason that happened is because when manga was kind of picking up steam over here, one of the big series that tipped the scales was Sailor Moon. And then Fushigi Yugi that came shortly after that, which was also a success. And then you move a couple of years forward and now you've got like Fruits Basket, right? So shoujo as a commercial success was pretty ground floor for the West. So the idea of women as a demographic, and I'll tell you part of the reason why this worked, is because you should really read Casey Branza's, it was her dissertation when she got her PhD, but I think it's called Manga in America. It's basically her book where she went and interviewed a ton of industry people, and she was talking about how the manga industry started over here. And there was a concerted effort. Before the manga boom, manga was sold floppy in chapters in comic stores. That's how you used to be able to get Ranma in half. And sometimes they do graphic novels that were very expensive and they were slightly bigger trim size. And then there was like...
Oh, yeah, I know. I remember that.
And there was a concerted effort to working like directly with Borders, Books and Music at the time, with, okay, let's just go straight to the graphic novels. Let's put them in bookstores. And women are in bookstores more than men. So local comic stores have always skewed kind of male, whereas they say twice as many women read in this country than men. So women were at bookstores. So when they started putting shoujo manga in bookstores, that was a big component of the manga boom, that they were reaching girls who were not reading comics.
I 100% agree, because I remember when the boom started, and all of a sudden, like, I thought my Borders was great because they had like one copy each of most of the Mason Nikoku series, which I, at the age of 12 years old, sat on the floor and read all of it in the store.
I think we've all done that.
Listen, I didn't get an allowance.
Yeah, that's fair.
I like, part of what I was getting to is that, like, I think showed like the manga boom started when and Viz had put out a few titles, but like when Tokyo Pop turned around, they were like, Sailor Moon has been a big success for us, Rares has been a big success for us, we're going to start putting out all of these series. And a fair portion of the start of what started with the right to left original, like, not unflipped manga, like, a lot of those were shoujo. And I think like, them getting it into bookstores was important. And also that, like I said before, like, the young female demographic is so neglected.
Right. Absolutely.
And it's gotten better in Western media, like Hunger Games, and for better or for worse, Twilight.
For sure.
And so, like, and I know at least it was the case for me that, like, all this stuff started coming out: Kodocha, Marmalade Boy, Mars,
Peach Girl, Parakiss,
yeah, like, it was all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh, like, these are series about teenage girls, like, and like different kinds of series, like, like, my favorite shoujo series have always been like the action adventure ones, like, Fushigi Yugi, Basara, or like the ones that have kind of a fantastical element. But like, I just bought rebought the first 5 volumes of Mars because, like, that is such a, like, stellar series. Like, so, like, bringing over not just the action adventure ones that, like, maybe guys will see it and think because they're fighting then it's okay for them to watch. Like, but the ones that were just about ordinary girls that the readers will be able to relate to. That was so, like, there is a lot to say about Tokyo Pop as a company, but I will always credit them with recognizing the power of the female demographic and committing to it.
Yep. And I think that's partially why when you look not just at sort of what I was saying earlier about how much there's so many women in editorial. I mean, if you look at books, like books, the book industry is mostly women too. But if you look at the fandom in manga and you compare it to the fandom in, let's say, superhero comics, and how much better our fandom is compared to superhero stuff, compared to like more general Western comics, not web comics, that's a totally separate thing. Video games is like the worst. That's like the worst fandom. That I think manga and anime has been a lot more egalitarian when it comes to gender, when it comes to sexuality, partially because I think when it started over here, it started catering to a broader audience to begin with than a lot of these other things that were like, oh, let's market this to men and this will be for men. Not only did Japan have stuff that was more clearly, this is the stuff for men and this is the stuff for women and we do both, but also because the stuff for women, quite frankly, I think because of Sailor Moon, was really commercially successful and, like you said, filled that vacuum. And if you want to talk about the biggest manga in the West right now, absolutely the Shonen Jump titles are outselling everything. I mean, that's just the way that it works. It's always worked that way. Shonen Jump had a specific outreach plan to get more female readers when they used to joke about it. The nickname for it being Bishonen Jump, where they were like, no, we need more slashable moments, we need more beautiful heroes, we need to get more women to read this. And also just because, like, I think maybe it was Ashley who said it, that it's like women will relate to a male character, men will not relate to a female character, so stuff that skews male does generally get bigger audiences. At the same time, like, it's, even though those are the biggest, the stuff for girls, even though, like, you know, critics brush over it like a little bit more, not the good critics, but kind of like the snooty kind of like, oh, you know, the good manga is this random seinen that I picked. Like, I love Golden Kamuy, right. Don't get me wrong, but it's like, that is not the only kind of story that is told. You know, anything by Urasawa and stuff, great comics, not the only artistic stuff that's being told. And I think that, like, you know, the numbers didn't lie. The stuff that people were buying, the stuff that people were enjoying, the things that people were cosplaying at cons, you know, like, there's always been a really good contingent of kind of girl power in there from the ground up. So there are so many problems still, but I consider myself pretty lucky. I could be in video game fandom, and then where would I be?
Yeah. And I think, like, you know, you said webcomics are a separate thing. I would say, at least for the webcomics people I know, they are far more influenced by manga than they are by anything Western.
There's a lot of that. I mean, partially because webcomics is so global. I mean, that's a topic for another podcast, but and it's also kind of where people who were not really allowed in the industry clubs ended up doing their own work. So it does tend to be more female, queer, and full of people of color, because, like, that's where those people who are maybe not getting their stuff picked up because they're different from the people who have been hired before. And I'm talking like Western contracts right now, right? Because in Japan, totally separate thing. Speaking of which, I read a really interesting story about how I think it was Marvel did a portfolio review in Japan at like a Comic-Con or something. And they were like, okay, we'd love to see artists here, you know, apply if you want to work for Marvel. And it was like 80 to 90% female were coming, like, saying like, oh, I want to work for Marvel. Here's my Spider-Man drawings and stuff. So, like, when we're going to talk about who's creating comics, there are far more women creating comics for men than vice versa in Japan. So,
absolutely. Yeah, I can't think of any male shoujo manga writers. And I mean, that could be partially because of pen names.
Yeah, I have a feeling they're
a lot of Monthly Girls Nozaki-kun, which is
well,
not shoujo itself, but it's really such a lovely parody of shoujo manga, and you know, you can tell it's affectionate because the writer does do primarily shoujo manga.
Yes, that is an awesome series, 100%. Like, everybody should watch that.
But yeah, like, shoujo manga has been just like really incredibly important, and it really frustrates me when people don't take it as seriously. Yeah. Like, I both love and am frustrated by the fact that, like, Viz's shoujo beat line exists, like, because
I have so many feelings.
I have, like, I mean, listen, I don't, like, I don't want to say that, like, it's not as good, or like, but obviously, like, I spend a lot of money on Shoujo Beat manga. I check out a lot of Shoujo Beat manga from the library. Like, what they're working so hard to bring over, titles aimed at girls. But at the same time, it's, so easy for people who are not like, who are dismissive of shoujo manga to like look and see the Shoujo Beat label and be like, nah.
Yeah.
And they miss out on it. And
what I don't like, again, why I started my own podcast was, again, because exactly what you've all said. Like, shoujo manga is commercially successful, but like overlooked by critics, and nobody like writes long essays about it, even though they'll go write long essays or whatever about like trash like Darling in the Franxx. Like, I love Darling in the Franxx, but I'm like, come on, guys. Like, yeah. God. And just like, what frustrates me too is that, my romantic partner works at Viz. We talk a lot about manga, obviously. He's also really into podcasts. He listens to hundreds of podcasts. He's like, Viz has its own podcast, the Shonen Jump podcast, which Jeff has been on. So like, he'll come home and talk about how cool or whatever that is. He's been on the One Piece podcast. He talks about like Gintama podcasts. I'm sure that there are plenty of Naruto and whatever other specific shonen series podcasts. And I'm just like, it makes me so mad that like Viz as a company has a podcast that excludes half of their own company. Like,
yeah,
what are you talking about? I don't understand. Like, I just don't get it. Like,
or the signature line, like, which is just like, has these beautiful releases, like, and they are like great paper stock, really nice covers, bigger trim size. One josei manga, one shoujo manga.
Yeah.
They're like, Fumi Yoshinaga breaks barriers a lot. I mean, What Did You Eat Yesterday, I think, is technically a seinen. She's done kind of every genre. And then Natsume Ono, who doesn't, I mean, her stuff's not really shoujo. I don't know about Aka 13, what that technically was, but Natsume Ono's done stuff for various lines. And she's really cool, but she's definitely writes slightly more masculine things. Yeah, no, I mean, you're totally right. And this is where it comes down to that, like, oh, this is the classy stuff that gets nominated, and this is everything else.
Tenjo Tenge, very classy.
Well, I'm not sure anybody was really considering that art, but your point taken, yeah.
And it's like, so, like, why are these, like, action-driven masculine series better than emotionally driven feminine series? Like, why is Tokyo Ghoul better than looking at my bookshelf? Why is
do we want like real
to
basic?
Yona? Like,
Okay.
Why is Tokyo Ghoul better than Yona of the Dawn? I love Yona of the Dawn. I am all about Yona of the Dawn. Why isn't Utena released under signature? It did, to be fair, get a beautiful re-release. But, like, or Basara, like, these are all series that are, like, just as good, if not better, than a lot of what's released under the signature line. But because they're shoujo, they receive the same release as everything else.
I would be interested to see if they're going to do something with Banana Fish now that the anime is coming, that they might.
Oh, God, please.
Banana Fish, like, credit where credit is due. They really tried to make that work, and they were, from the minute one, incredibly, okay, maybe not minute one, because I'm not sure what they did in Pulp, but once it became sort of like a, it was really hitting graphic novels and stuff, they're like, this is a shoujo, and it was one of the first titles that had the shoujo, like, logo on the side.
That's true.
That they were like, it was really important in Japan that this was a shoujo, that when Banana Fish was running in the 80s, you could see salarymen on the train reading, I think it was Flowers magazine, like something just really femme, because they had to know what happened in Banana Fish, because Banana Fish is like a hard-boiled gang drama with extreme homoerotic tension in it. And, like, it is an amazing series. I mean, freaking don't get me started on Banana Fish. And I'm so stoked we're getting an anime. You have no idea.
Yes.
I'm waiting for 30 years.
Oh, directed by Hiroko Tsumi.
Yep, it's got a good...
I love her. It's so gonna be.
It's
so
a good
good
team. I think it might. I mean, I'm bummed that they're putting it in modern day because part of what, like, so much of its premise is based on the 80s. I do think it can be updated, but it is a little bit of a bummer because it partially had to do with like the rise of super crime, quote unquote, in New York, and everyone was afraid of it. But yeah, like Banana Fish, it is still quite masculine for being a shoujo. It was the shoujo that men would read, so it might be one of the ones that gets the signature line. I think, unfortunately, with Basada, my guess is it wasn't that commercially successful, and it's very long.
No, it's not pretty.
I think it's beautiful, but it is not. It is certainly not a marketable art style. 100% agree with you there. Like, people are not going to pick it up and be like, "Oh, this girl can be my waifu." I mean, it is the furthest thing from kind of waifu styling that you can get, where it looks like a watercolor painting of people crying blood, you know, like it's great, but yeah.
Yeah, it's just, you know, it's a little bit of a bummer because there are other manga lines that really do give really nice releases to shoujo and josei manga. I've been buying Fruits Basket and Princess Jellyfish.
Yep.
And I know Fruits Basket is a proven property. I'm sure it did very, very well for Tokyo Pop when they first released it. And there was a lot of excitement over the re-release from Yen Press, but like these other companies give their shoujo manga like these beautiful releases, and I feel like that is less likely to happen by, once again, do not want to put down the people who work with the imprint, because all of the people who I've talked to from it are very passionate and they really do love the series that they work on. But these series are so much less likely to get a release like that from Viz, and Viz is great because they do license a lot, probably more than others. I just wish they had a chance at getting that kind of a treatment.
Yeah.
I wonder a little bit if girls care too. I think, you know, there's something that I've noticed a little bit more the older that I get, and now that I've, you know, it's funny, but like when I worked at Sparkler and we would take these survey polls and see what kind of our demographic was, and then now I'm at 7Cs, like 7Cs and Sparkler have basically opposite demographics. It's like 60% female and 20% male in one, and vice versa for the other one. Like 7Cs is much more, at least the people who take the surveys, right? We publish a lot of kind of male oriented stuff. And I'm starting to see that like some of these nicer releases, the idea of collector's editions, seem to appeal more to men. And I'll tell you why. This is just a personal theory of mine, but like when it comes to male fandom, I see a lot of trends in things like collectors stuff, for sure. Collecting things, figurines, pins, baseball cards. You know, it starts at a young age. There's all these collector mentalities. And also things like running wikis. People, I think a lot of male fandom falls very heavily on canon and kind of making sure everybody is following canon correctly. There's a little bit of that gatekeeper thing, for sure. Oh my gosh,
yes. It's the thing I hate most about fandom.
Right.
It's the curative fandom versus the transformative fandom.
Exactly. So, and I've personally, it seems to me that male fandom is more curative, whereas female is more transformative. They all go to fanfic, cosplay, fan art. It's why sometimes there's a series that is targeted to women that is like the biggest thing in fandom, and it's kind of struggling financially because the women are not buying it because they don't necessarily care about the original core story. They care about the feelings that it brought into them and the other ways that they can recreate that feeling or expand upon that feeling. It's less about what do I have and more how does it make me feel. Like, I think female fandom is a little bit more experience-based, you know? Like, the catharsis. How can I get that catharsis again? Well, if I go off and make a fanfic about this one part that I liked again, I can recreate that feeling, etc. So, I think when it comes to nice releases, it does... I totally agree with you in that, I don't like when the Eisners was almost always boys stuff coming up. Where it's like, yeah, I get it. You guys like seinen. It's been, it's definitely been better in later years. And
I think women are more likely to use libraries too.
Yep. I think they are.
So it's great. So it's great when we check stuff out from libraries. It's great to support libraries, and by checking this stuff out from libraries, we'll make the libraries buy more of it. But at the same time, it's not the same as the person who, like, every person who checked it out from the library, if they had all bought the copy for themselves, then, like, even if the audience is the same size, it's a less profitable audience.
Yeah. Well, I wonder always, because, this is a real basic, like, very high level thing, but, like, there's always talk about women make less money. So I'm like, yes, so if we make less money, we have less money to spend.
Yeah.
And
I was just going to add that pay gap.
I work in the pink collar.
Yeah.
Teaching, I'm a toddler teacher. I wouldn't want to do anything else. But since it is traditionally women's work, it pays like crap.
Yeah. And I think that women are also expected to like buy things that men are not, like makeup and all these extra things that dudes don't have to worry about at all. So, like, we both make less money in that, and, like, it's terrible. And, like, I'm like, yeah, so we have less money to spend on manga, obviously.
Oh yeah. But, like, I do feel like things are changing. Not to get too much into, like, 7 Seas mode, but I'm getting into 7 Seas mode a little bit. We put out a book that I'm sure you've heard about, which is...
I love it.
I'm sure you've heard about my lesbian experience with loneliness, which ended up becoming...
I checked that out of the library.
There you go. That is actually a nicer release as well. You can probably tell from the paper. And it was color, sort of. It's like a pink and white and black. That book has ended up becoming one of those kind of female-oriented stories. And it's not exclusively, and I'll go into that in a second, but, like, that ended up becoming something that, it's called My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness. The book is pink. And it's been sweeping awards categories and selling really well, and just left this profound effect on people, partially because it's largely about things like mental illness, and there's not a person in the world who will pick up that book and not find something to relate to in this poor woman's life. That there's so much going on, and she's dealing with so many issues. And, the cover, which has a nipple on it, is her staring down a lesbian escort when she's like, I'm going to lose my virginity and hire this lesbian escort because I think I'm gay. Maybe this will solve my problems. But it's really her sexuality is such it's just one piece of a very big puzzle about identity. Full disclosure, I did work on the script on that one too, besides the fact that we're marketing the hell out of it. But first time I worked on that, I cried. I couldn't, like, I think I hit page 40 and I was crying. The sequel's coming out very soon. That also, I was crying in the shower. Like, after working on it, I was just like, oh my God, these books are so emotional.
Yeah. They're really excellent.
Yeah.
And I think that with the sort of growing prominence of webcomics as well is sort of blurring the lines a little bit, because they're not, like, instantly tossed into this magazine surrounded by advertisements. They're is Diary of an MMO Junkie, like, which was, I haven't read the manga, but I loved the anime, full disclosure, directed by a Nazi.
Yeah.
He does not get any money for it. But I feel like I have to say that every time it comes up. I have made peace with the fact that I still love the show, and I will still continue to talk about it, because he is not going to get to work with that studio again. He is facing consequences for his views.
Excellent.
But anyway, I know, it's so unexpected.
So refreshing.
That was a webcomic. Like, Yuri on Ice is an anime original, and they're making more original anime these days. Like, it's not, you can't just categorize it immediately. Like you can probably you can look at it and be like, oh, this feels like josei to me, but like it's not defined. And I think that's really cool because I do believe that shoujo manga tends to be and I'm not, this is probably the case for most demographics, like it's kind of a feedback loop where it's like, because I feel like the kinds of stories that get put into shoujo manga these days are more limited because anything, and josei manga as well, because anything with potential crossover appeal tends to get put into shonen and seinen magazines, and there are exceptions. But I look at a lot of the more recent shoujo I've read, and the stuff that sort of got me into the quote unquote genre, stuff like Fushigi Yugi, stuff like Basara, like stuff like Magic Knight Rayearth, like you're not seeing it quite as much. It tends to be more focused on school romance or supernatural romance. Like there's not a lot of high adventure, except like the main exception that I know of is Yona of the Dawn, which is great, but it still feels like it's still kind of a throwback.
It is, yeah.
Which my view could be limited by what is coming out in the U.S. versus what is coming out in Japan.
Yeah, it's absolutely an issue of the stuff that's not being brought over anymore. There were a couple publishers who were tackling adventure shoujo a lot, in addition to Viz. One of which was Tokyopop was doing a fair amount of that stuff.
Yeah.
Because again, from the beginning, shoujo was a good seller for them. And the other one, I don't know if you guys remember CMX, which was technically an imprint.
A little bit.
Yeah, it was an imprint of DC Comics and thus backed up by Time Warner. And the shit they brought over was amazing, but I'm sure none of it was a financial success at all. I always figured the line was by somebody who really liked like cool 80s shoujo, who was just publishing as much as possible before she was caught by Time Warner being like, wait a minute, everything's losing money. And we got all kinds of things like Saki Hiwatari's weirder stuff. Like she did Please Save My Earth, but like Tower of the Future, which unfortunately was not that good. I liked it better in Japanese when I couldn't understand the words. She has trouble keeping a story together. Such great premises, but then it's like, it all falls apart. They brought over Cypher, which is, I don't know if anybody has ever seen that meme of like a weird guy, an anime guy in a jeans jacket dancing, like a really old anime. It's used as a reaction gif. It was from Cypher, which was basically a Japanese mangaka who was obsessed with American music videos, was like, I'm gonna write a story about twins who are sharing a life in New York City. It's really great. It's very 80s. And I'll just kind of like Swan from Eroica with Love. Like, these are amazing titles. Why would you put them out over here? They're all gonna fail. So
right, but also like, the series that you've named are older series.
Yeah, a lot of them were old.
And the newer series that I see coming out, even like if I'm like looking, like haven't done many like deep dives because I try to keep it to licensed stuff. I don't like reading scans. Right. A, because I like supporting companies. B, the translations in scans tend to be awful, and I cannot deal with the stilted machine translated English anymore. Cannot do it. Like, even looking at like what's up and coming in Japan, like I don't see a lot of the like action adventure shoujo anymore. And so like I feel like it is a little bit of a feedback loop because like these are the series that we can tell, these are the stories that we can tell. I have gotten some of the sense that like a lot of editors do like have a fair bit of control over what goes out in the manga. These are the series that we get greenlit, and admittedly a lot of this is guesswork. I don't know what goes on in there, but that's sort of always been my sense, is that the commercial shoujo has kind of become more focused on these sort of traditional romance stories.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. When I'm trying to think about, like, I remember Aria magazine, which unfortunately just shut down, which is kind of proving your point. that they started Aria for girls. I think the tagline in the magazine was like, for girls who are tired of romance, and it ran stuff like number 6, you know, like things that were in there were like non kind of romance shoujo, and they just shut down like literally this month or something. So I think you're right that a lot of the epic stuff, I've always used Hanato Yume magazine as kind of a barometer of a lot of stuff because it is one of the bigger ones in Japan. And I think Hana Yume sort of jumped the shark with Fruits Basket, quite frankly. Like, Skip Beat runs in there, and I love Skip Beat, and, you know, Hanakimi, like, I think that ran in Hana Yume.
Hanakimi ran for a very long time.
It did. It was kind of like around the 2000s where I do feel like shoujo kind of lost its bite a little bit, because the 80s stuff was wackier and wilder. Like the 70s stuff was wacky and wild.
Shoujo.
80s, yeah, it was more grounded, but they're like, let's talk about gangs more, and that's why you get like even Cypher is kind of like about how crime-filled New York is and stuff, and how people's lives are so wild. And then, yeah, the 90s is when you had a lot of this big adventure stuff. The big series were Basara and Shiyugi, among others.
Red River.
Yeah,
I like
Red River. Oh boy, talk about
Red River's a problematic fave.
Oh yeah,
problematic fave.
Well, I like how so many Portal stories are about you being summoned to be a hero, and this one it's like you're being summoned to be a blood sacrifice. It's like page 2, you know, great. Yeah, and I do think you're right that there's a little bit less adventure, and I think that's also, you were mentioning earlier that some of the big comics now in Japan actually started on the web. My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness was a comic she had done on Pixiv that she expanded into a book. There's a lot of that.
Otakoi too.
And a lot of those tend to be more like diary style or 4-panel comic stuff. Things that are just really not adventure. Like a 4-panel comic or 4-koma is like quite big in Japan right now. Some of it comes over here, some of it doesn't. Like the really good stuff is things like, you know, Nozaki's a 4-panel and it's great.
Right.
And there's you know, some of the stuff we've worked on in 7 Seas too, where like, I mean, My Lesbian is a good example of it, but we have other ones too. I think like New Game is I mean, it's very far away from shoujo, but the one about the moe girls making a video game, that was a 4-panel. I think some of the stuff that's coming later, I think it's just becoming kind of a bigger thing in Japan. So yeah, and that stuff is not going to lend itself. So I think you're probably onto something there. It's just not really in the cards.
Yeah.
It'll shift. It always does.
It's a bummer. Yep.
You know,
yeah. It's very trend driven.
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to ask actually how, if like this is only tangentially related, but how do you have a way in which you make dude bros who have never read shoujo manga like read a shoujo manga? Because I feel like this has been my struggle, is that I meet so many people who are like, I love manga and can list off like a jillion shonen and seinen things, then they're like, maybe I've read like Oran, or like, you know, one of the ones that is like acceptable for everybody to like, you know.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, actually, you just kind of, I think you answered your own question there. There are a couple series that have been really good crossover. I find that like comedies tend to be the best to get boys over.
I agree.
I knew that like when I lived in Toronto, there were 2 incredibly girly shows that the boys were super into, like maybe even more than the girls. One was Gals. Did you guys ever see Gals?
No, but I know a little bit about it. It's definitely not.
It's kind of about like aggressive, like kind of street fashion girls taking over different areas of Tokyo and beating up boys and making them carry their bags. Like, for some reason, the boys loved this. It was very funny. And I think it was also kind of non-threatening the way that these like really scary girls were like, you know, 15. The art style is very kind of 2002. And the other one was Princess Tutu. A lot of dudes were really into that because
guys like Princess Tutu.
Yeah, it's got some of these elements that overlap into moe. Magical girl series actually tend to do quite well with boys. There are a lot of different types of them. But a magical girl series that kind of works on a couple different levels, like like Princess Tutu is a pretty good one. I think also if you want to talk about like what is some of the coolest shoujo coming out right now in terms of like mainstream stuff. I don't know who the editor-in-chief of Lala is, but like they have been knocking it out of the park. When you have a magazine that is running Orana High School Host Club, Vampire Knight, and Natsume's Book of Friends right next to each other. Those are 3 really great examples of different things that you can do with shoujo. And Natsume is another really good kind of reach out if you want boys to watch more shoujo, because it's kind of like Mushishi if Mushishi were fun. I'm not a big Mushishi fan, in case you can't tell.
I like Mushishi, but I definitely wouldn't call it fun.
Yeah, I watched it and I was like, I'm bored.
Yeah,
I don't know.
much,
I don't get
right?
it.
It's lovely. I wish this was more accessible. Then you can go watch or read Natsume's Book of Friends. And in fact, I think the anime improves a lot of things from the manga there, because I think her imagination for the art anyway exceeds her talent a little bit. Even though it's a great manga, the animation studio kind of decided to go sort of Ghibli with it, and it's great. It's such a great series, and it keeps going. It's really successful in Japan, and that cat is super marketable.
And this is sort of where the lack of like prestige releases sort of galls me, because like it's so much easier to hand someone something without that watermark with that beautiful release and be like, here, check this out. Because what my strategy has been with my boyfriend has been, no, seriously, watch this with me. It's important to me that you sit down and watch this with me.
Yeah.
You're not going to get out of this. We'll watch a shonen afterwards. But watch this with me. And that has worked a few times. But yeah, like I would say finding the stuff that makes a good entry point, like Yona of the Dawn.
Yeah,
I think
that's a pretty good one. Yeah,
it would be a good one. It's more historical fantasy, and just what do they like?
Nozaki's a good one too. Like you said, I don't think it's technically a shoujo, but it is absolutely about shoujo.
I haven't read Orisama Teacher, but if it has a similar sense of humor,
could be. Yeah. Oh, that reminds me that Otomen is another really great cross-gender crowd pleaser, because it's basically about how gender is a social construct, and it's really fun.
Or Lovely Complex.
Oh God, Lovecom is the best.
I love that series.
Yeah, I think like a really good romantic comedy. I've seen a lot of dudes into those ones. I think the epic shoujo fantasies are a little bit harder. I do think Basara is one that you could get a lot of men to read, but it's like pretty out of print. I mean, I think you can get it.
Yeah.
I think maybe you can get it digitally, but they did like a brief anime for it and it wasn't very good.
I think so. Yeah, that's something that I hope like all of the 90s revival series
It'd be great
that come out do well, because I would love to see a real adaptation of Basara.
Totally agree. And you know what? It's post-apocalyptic. I think it ties really into sort of trends that are happening now and the kinds of stories people want to read. Instead of like you were mentioning that so many of them were kind of historical, these 90s adventures. That one was really like, okay, this is after the fall of civilization and we're down to kind of a desert punk. And like, yeah, you're absolutely right. That would be awesome. Maybe we'll get it if Banana Fish does well.
Everyone watch Banana Fish, you must.
Everyone in Japan will. I hope everyone here does too.
Is it just that shoujo manga needs more anime adaptations? That's more what I'm hearing.
Quite
right now.
possibly. I think that honestly might have something to do with it. And I do think we are sort of starting to see more shoujo manga adaptations in anime, or at least more stuff aimed at a female audience.
Definitely a lot of josei compared to like there was no josei. I think maybe shoujo has upped a little bit. I mean, they've certainly kind of in the same way there's more josei, there's more boys love. Like I think there's a little bit more shoujo, but I think more than anything they've expanded outside of the traditional shoujo demographic. Yuri on Ice is a really good example of something that was, it was definitely sort of aimed to women and, penned by women, but like isn't what you wouldn't compare it to Fushigi Yugi, right? Like it's not. No, it's a little bit more adult and sophisticated. I'm really looking forward to watching Wotakoi now that I read some of the manga in preparation for this podcast.
I'm really enjoying
it. Oh my god, I love it so much.
I'm really into it.
Oh god. So I mean, it just started, right? There's like one episode. 2. Okay. Oh, I'm so excited. I'm gonna Watch it tonight.
It's really good. I've really been enjoying it. But yeah, like that community was more on board with shoujo anime. And I hope to see more shoujo anime being made, maybe as an offshoot of like more josei and josei-ish series being put out.
We didn't have to pick. We should
fingers crossed.
All of them, yeah.
There was a lot this season, and not most of them aren't good. Most of them are not good, but they exist.
Like Otome
That's a
game
start.
adaptations. There's always like one or two of those, and most of them are quite bad.
So I sort of want to move into sort of wrapping up with like recommendations, series that we feel like don't get enough attention, that deserve more. And talking about Karikano made me think of A Devil and Her Love Song, which is not a series I've heard anyone else really talk about, which is a shame because it's sort of a counterpoint to the issues that we were talking about with Karikano. It has some major it has some problems, but like it's got the strong defiant female lead with the kind of grouchy isolated male love interest, and it has like a near rape scene. Sorry, spoilers, but you know, I also think this is something that people should go in knowing. And he apologizes. And so much of the series isn't just about her relationship with him, but also her relationship with her friends, and that is shown to be just as important, and just as valid and fulfilling to her. And it does not end with, well, everyone has to, you know, get married and have babies. Which is, you know, like two things that you see a lot in shoujo manga. And I really, really appreciated how it handled things even when it had issues.
Nice.
Yeah. So let's see. Real quick, some other recommendations that I didn't get to mention, but that might touch on things that we talked about. The Story of Sainkoku. The anime is unfortunately very out of print. I have it all on DVD though. Haha. I have so much stuff that is so hard to get. It's wonderful. There's benefits to buying stuff physically. I have Millennium Actress.
Whoa.
Anyway, but you know, the Story of Sainkoku, the manga is out from Viz. It doesn't cover everything in the anime, which is they're both based on a long series of light novels, which should be bring over shoujo light novels. That's something that has not happened yet much.
Digital.
And
there's some in digital. Yeah, not really in print.
Yeah.
I mean, a few spin-offs. They had a Hot Gimmick light novel. There's one or two Vampire Knight ones. Like, the ones that are actually tied in. But yeah, there's not many. But go online, and I think the name of the company is Cross Infinite Worlds. They're doing a couple of shoujo.
I've seen, they're just getting started. But anyway, the Story of Sainkoku is another series that sort of acknowledges and deals with the patriarchy in a pretty decent way. It's sort of a fantasy pseudo China, and the main character is from a poor noble family. Like, they're aristocrats, but they're also like extremely impoverished. Her whole thing is that she wants to become a government bureaucrat, but she can't because she's a girl, even though she's incredibly intelligent, incredibly competent. And once she goes to the palace to sort of fix the new emperor, who is just like totally withdrawn, not governing at all, and so she gets hired to be his pseudo concubine for a while and basically like whip him into shape. because she's a teacher. But like once she goes there and she meets people there, she finds allies who are like, okay, how can we make this possible? And there's actually a scene where like her love, spoiler alert, the emperor turns out to be the main love interest, where he's like, I really, really love you, and I really want you to stay here. And she's like, I love you too, but this is my dream. Like, and I'm not going to just walk away from that to be with you. Which is so great to see in a series aimed at young women. Like, that is very, like, that is much more Tamora Pierce-esque, I think. It reminds me of sort of Tamora Pierce in a different setting and not action-oriented because it's bureaucrats instead of knights. Is there anything else that's coming readily to mind? No, I feel like we've talked about a lot of series that I really love. Do either of you have any series that you think people that are underappreciated?
For sure.
I mean,
do you want to go first, Ashley?
I'm sure
I've been talking a lot.
You've got a long list, I'm sure.
Sure. I mean, I'll just name. I mean, I recently did the latest episode of my podcast is about We Were There, which I talked about with the head of Shoujo Beat, Nancy, about like why it's so underrated is part of the podcast. But I definitely feel that it is very underrated, at least in America. And it's very much a like kind of dark slice of life about a boy whose first girlfriend died, and he's trying to move on from that with another girl who has the same name, Nana. And it, the first arc is very much a high school romance story, and then he leaves and they don't see each other for several years. So the second half becomes kind of a different story about growing up and like moving on, or perhaps not moving on from that relationship, and meeting each other again. And I just thought it went to like, stereotypical dark places, I guess, of shoujo, but handled them in like a much more beautiful way than many series often pull off. Then I guess my silly recommendation would be like, I'm really into QQ Sweeper / Queen's Quality.
She's a great mangaka. You know what? Like, yeah.
But I feel like I don't see any.
Didn't work for me, but
yeah.
I like Beastmaster. Those are the two things of hers that I've read.
Yeah, so I feel like everybody is still kind of like, what is this weird manga about, like, sweepers? Like, why are they cleaning? And I'm like, no, you guys, it's great. I love it. It's so fantastic. It's the right amount of silly to dark that I really love. I mean, I still don't understand why it's two different series. Like, QQ Sweeper is very much like a prologue setup feeling. So you'll definitely just want to go on to Queen's Quality. I don't know. Get on it.
Yeah, I have to bring up Seven Seas books. I mean, that's my job. And also, I think the shoujo that we publish, people either don't see or they don't think of. One that we've had that was very successful and actually was nominated for an Eisner was Orange, which is a good one.
Oh, yeah,
if
I
you
like
like
that one.
We Were There. Another one that's kind of about... It's got a little sci-fi element to it. That one's really good. The one that I'm currently like super into, and I'm going to scream it from the rooftops whenever I can, is we publish a series called Beasts of Abigail, which almost nobody has heard of, and it's incredible. And every volume that I read, I'm just like screaming every other page. And I'm a grown-ass woman. It's kind of Omegaverse for babies, about like... So if anybody's familiar with the Omegaverse, I'm not going to go into it, but it's about like kind of wolf people, sort of. I mean, they just have kind of like the wolf, well, they have wolf ears and wolf tails, and some of them have more, but about a girl who's like a karate master who's visiting this lovely island covered in roses where there's this like castle / prison that she can't see, sort of, that is housing, it's basically like prison school for wolf kids. She ends up sprouting ears and a tail and nobody really knows why, and she gets thrown into this terrible place with all of these werewolf kids, kind of, who move in packs and have alphas and betas and omegas. And there's like the really nice guy who's gonna help her, and the really mean guy who marks her on the first episode. But like it's got first of all, she's like fully trained in martial arts and keeps kicking everyone's ass. Secondly, it's got like, you know, the usual kind of alpha, you know, the bad boy with wolf ears taking his shirt off a lot and like going after her and her kicking him in the face. But there's also like sort of the band of transgender wolves who kind of pick her up, and they all become like really great friends. And there's like the really nice prince who's really kind to her is basically a beta to some like this lady who's like student council president who steps all over him. It is so much fun. It's like got all of the shoujo stuff that you're used to, but with a lot more bite and like a lot more firepower. So everybody is like constantly either super nice or super mean to everybody. Everybody's always slapping each other and biting each other. And it's just so much fun. I love it so much. But it never goes the kind of edgy that's like uncomfortable. It's like fun edgy, you know? Like, because everybody's given as good as they're getting. And if you like Omegaverse, this is like, which is kind of like dog people and wolf people, this is a really easy teen friendly entryway before you get into the weird stuff with like nodding and male pregnancy. Like that's, if you like Beasts of Abigail, there's a whole thing you can go to online about this. And people who are from Teen Wolf fandom know all about that. But this is like the teen friendly tapping into the Omegaverse with all the shoujo tropes, just kind of everything cranked to 11. So freaking love Beasts of Abigail and recommend it to everybody. Anybody who likes shoujo, I like slap a copy in their hand. I'm like, please read it so I can talk to somebody about it. How great it is. So that's my big
and also everyone should watch Utena.
Oh yeah, I mean, you kind of have to.
Yeah, obviously.
It didn't come up. It didn't come
It's
up
true.
very much. So everyone should watch Utena, and that's pretty much my final thing to say. Anyone have any final thoughts?
We're getting Rose of Versailles one of these days.
Ooh.
Yeah, the manga in English. Udon licensed it a while ago.
I know, and
we
we've
don't trust
been waiting for
that.
so long.
I don't trust it. I'm skeptical until it's real.
You guys have Claudine, right?
Huh?
7 Seasons releasing Claudine, right?
Yes.
Is that 7
Yes,
Seasons?
actually. That's,
Okay, that's a
also
better
by Ryoko Ikeda. That's a 1 volume. Now, it's arguable if it's about being transgender. It basically is, but there's been some debate about if that's the story she was trying to tell when she wrote this like 40 years ago. But yeah, it's basically about gender and sexuality. And it's short, too. Like, it's like a 1 volume thing to kind of... And
It is in my right stuff card.
yeah, it's coming very soon. Actually, I think I just got my early copy, the digital version anyway. But yeah, we're really excited about that. And we were so happy because we've been doing a lot of classic. You know, we have the original Devilman is coming out, the original Harlock, the original Cutie Honey, Space Battleship Yamato. Claudine is kind of the classic shoujo that we're doing right now. So yeah, if you want stuff like that, guys, go buy it. And it's a sad manga for sure, but just so good. I mean, she's like, you know, one of the big shoujo mangaka, like the founding mothers of you know, Moto Hagio and Keiko Takamiya and Ryoko Ikeda is a big one. And we were talking about Utena. Utena is kind of a love letter to Rose of Versailles, which one of these days, in theory, we're going to get.
Everyone should buy classic shoujo so that more of it will get brought over.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of it available now. You can get a lot of Moto Hagio
Yeah,
stuff.
thank you to Rachel Thorne and Fantagraphics.
Yep.
Largely. But anyway, all right, let's wrap up. As much as I really enjoy discussing this with you guys. So thank you for listening to Chatty AF. If you want to listen to more or to read more, you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you can get your podcasts. Our website is www.animefeminist.com. I don't know why I just added the www.
It's very important.
It's just a throwback to when the internet was new. You can also find us on Twitter at animefeminist, on Tumblr, and just, you know, put Anime Feminist into Google and I'm sure you can find us. We also have a Patreon, patreon.com/animefeminist. So if you enjoy our work, we would really appreciate we would really appreciate whatever donations you can make. Even $1 is really helpful, because we are getting close to breaking even, but still not quite there. So whatever you can contribute would be great. And we also welcome pitches from people of all demographics. Every single one. If you are a person, you can pitch to. So thank you for listening. And I never know how to end these sign-offs. Thank you for listening. Bye.
Bye.